It was fantastic. I felt in love not with anything or anybody in particular, but with everything. It's a very salutary thing to realize that the rather dull universe in which most of us spend most of our time is not the only universe there is. I think it's healthy that people should have this experience. These two icons were trying to describe the experiences of psychedelic drugs. Being in love with everything, an experience of a universe that makes this one look lame. It's no wonder psychonauts and scientists alike have seen psychedelics as nothing short of mind expanding, putting you in a higher state of consciousness. But maybe psychedelics don't put you in a higher state of consciousness. Maybe consciousness has multiple dimensions that can each be dialed higher or lower to make up a conscious state. This is what scientists Tim Bayne and Olivia Carter wanted to investigate. What they learned could be the beginning of a new way of understanding the human mind. What is a conscious state? It's not scientifically clear yet, but we all have an intuitive understanding of what it is. It's your mind on coffee versus not, or your mind on coffee versus a psychedelic. In scientific literature and maybe pop culture, it's been pretty common to rank these states as higher or lower than others. For example, a normal state would be lower than being jittery on coffee, which would be lower than being in a psychedelic state. However, this might not be the correct way to look at the relationships between different states of consciousness. These two scientists are challenging this idea of ranking conscious states along one dimension. They're doing this by analyzing studies done on participants who ingested psychedelics in a research setting. Many of these studies asked participants to rate their experiences using a well-tested questionnaire called the Altered State of Consciousness Rating Scale. Here's what the questionnaire looks like. Participants are asked to rate how much they agree with particular statements, including, "I felt I was being transformed in a miraculous way." While many studies use the questionnaire, a number of them also perform behavioral and physiological tests. Using these kinds of results from a vast number of studies, the scientists ended up categorizing the psychedelic state as being a combination of changes in 3 dimensions of consciousness rather than one. The first dimension is perception, which deals with how much information enters your consciousness from your senses. The second is cognition, which involves brain functions like memory and creativity. The third is experience of self, space, and time. Psychedelics affect all of these dimensions of consciousness in different ways. Psychedelics seem to increase your perception. Many people have reported things like being able to see colors and memories more vividly. People also reported being able to see more colors than normal. Although, interestingly, there doesn't seem to be any physical evidence that color perception is actually improved. There's also evidence that maybe the bandwidth of consciousness, or how much sensory content can enter consciousness, increases. Psychedelics seem to lower your cognitive abilities. For many participants, certain types of memory were impaired. They knew who the president was, but had a hard time counting backwards. It was also difficult for participants to pay attention to things for a sustained period of time. Creativity was also lumped into the cognition dimension, and counterintuitively, this seemed to decrease. One of the hallmarks of psychedelics in pop culture is the ability to expand creativity. Psychedelics seem to enhance the generation of new ideas, but seem to detract from the ability to evaluate how good those ideas actually were. For example, in one study, participants had a difficult time understanding proverbs. It's unclear what psychedelics do to your experience of self, space, and time. Participants agreed highly with statements like, "I experienced a touch of eternity," and "I experienced past, present, and future as the oneness." In terms of self and space, many participants experienced what is known as ego dissolution. The boundaries between myself and my surroundings seemed to blur. It seemed to me that my environment and I were one. However, it's unclear whether these are a result of impairments or improvements along this dimension. It's difficult to see how a one-dimensional view of levels of consciousness can explain all the aspects of a psychedelic experience. A multidimensional theory of conscious states has major implications for the current theories of consciousness. The 2 most prominent theories right now are integrated information theory, or IIT, and global workspace theory, or GWT. You can check out my video introducing them above. But they both fail to explain the psychedelic state. IIT is fundamentally rooted on the idea that conscious states equal level of consciousness, which is given by a single calculated number called phi. This is inherently a one-dimensional theory of conscious states. GWT barely takes conscious states into account. If these theories are going to work, they're going to have to confront this multi-dimensional aspect of conscious states. To me, this paper is a call to change course. The authors are asking the question, hey, why are we ranking conscious states along a single dimension? Looking at how psychedelics change a person's experience is suggesting there may be multiple dimensions upon which conscious states are built. I love the simplicity of this idea. Imagine dimensions of consciousness as the basic ingredients of bread. By combining those base ingredients in different amounts and processes, you can get a whole variety of breads. What if you could get a whole variety of conscious states in a similar way? We could understand the recipes of the conscious states we know, but also discover states we could never even imagine today. How broad is the landscape of our minds?